I'm going to show you this template that is really optimized for your workflow when it comes to music production. Bear in mind, this is specifically for electronic music producers. What's good everybody, it's VibeSynthetic. Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about production templates. Now why I like to talk about this is because it's about time that I need to upgrade my production template as well. I'm going to show you a production template that is really optimized for your workflow, and it's going to make things a lot easier in the long run, a lot faster, a lot more inspirational when it comes to creating your own music. Now bear in mind that this production template is done in Logic Pro X. However, if you're using other DAWs like Ableton or FL Studio, the same principle applies. Now without further ado, I think I shall start talking about my production template in Logic Pro, so let's get into it. Okay, so we have here in Logic Pro an instrument track, only one track, and we're gonna start everything from scratch. The first thing I want to do is to set up a drum group. For the drum group, I loaded up an instrument track because I usually like to use this thing called the Drum Machine Designer. For the Drum Machine Designer, you can actually load up all of your samples in these individual banks that you see over here, and these individual banks can then have all of your samples in separate tracks, which is good because when you set out a template, you want a good control of your drum kit. Now typically I would have a kick, a snare, a hi-hat, crash, and a percussion, and also a sample line. This sample line will be a separate track. I'll show you guys in a bit. I am just gonna delete these reverb and delay effects because it's not relevant to my production template. As you can see, we have instrument 1 here and an empty kit that is actually corresponding to one of the pads. Now I'm just gonna remove this for now. I'm just gonna rename this as kick, and then I'm just gonna add another one, which is snare. So we have these 5 tracks all in the Drum Designer kit, and I'm going to rename this kit as drums. In any case, if you guys want to add on more drums, feel free to add into the Drum Machine Designer, which is over here. And then you can add, and all your tracks will correspond correctly. Drum Designer by default is sending all of your drums to bus 6. Now bus 6 right now is your Drum Machine Designer, which is this one. One thing I like to do is to make sure that my drums are in a family kind of color group. So first thing, I'll just recolor this in this pink family. The kicks will be something like this. The snare will be a color within that family as well. So you have a nice color-coded family out there. Next thing I want to do is to create a synth group. So how do I do that? I am just going to change this to software instrument. For now, let's just put it as an empty channel strip. Usually I'll use Massive X. So I'll create this and I'll just rename this as my synth. And this will be leads. And I'll duplicate this and I'll name this as plugs. So these tracks, you can actually group them together, which you will want to create a track stack. Now I would say a summing stack will be the best because you can actually send the whole track to another auxiliary track. Likewise for the drums, it's already set up. So let's put it at the summing track, and I'll just rename this as Synth. Before I move on to the bass, I would like to change the look and feel of my drum kit. So I'm just gonna open my inspector window and I can change the icon. So that's the drum. For this one, let's just put it as under the drum kit icon. Just this. Gotta change it one by one. There you go. And then for your synths, I'm going to change this to a keyboard kind of feel. Maybe this one will be quite nice. And the synth leads, I will change this to something similar. It's probably this one as well. And then for the synths, I am just going to change the color of the synths itself. Look at it, everything is really nice. You can always collapse them so that they fall in one group. I'm I'm gonna do the same way again. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add another track, usually in an empty channel strip, because I use Massive X. You can also use an audio track if you guys want, so that you guys can load in your own samples, but for me I like to design my own sounds. Let's just name it as bass main. We can duplicate this as well to be as bass sub. So I like to have my bass as 2 layers sometimes, like the main one can be the main neuro bass or acid bass. The sub can stay there as a separate channel as well. So I'm gonna group these bass as one more group, create a track stack. I'm just gonna send it as a summing stack, and I'm just gonna rename this as bass. Now same thing, I'm just gonna change the color of this, because the bass would then, let's just put a pedal sign. So bass, bass main, bass sub. The last instrument that you want to use is usually samples, right? Like it can be vocal samples, it could be drum samples, sometimes it could be texture samples. But I'm just going to create 2 for now to group them up. Add another track, which is samples are usually audio. I'm just going to put it as 2 tracks over here, and I'm just going to say samples, effects. This one can be drums. And maybe let's add one more. This one can be vocals. So we have 3 samples here. I'm just going to group them. Be careful with this one, because you don't want them to be in a summing folder. You want them to be in just a normal folder, because sometimes the drums later on you want to route them to a drum auxiliary send separately. I'm just gonna create a track stack, and this will just be a folder stack. So I'm just gonna rename this as samples. Whenever you name all your tracks, right, the timeline view will correspond to the colors, and all the names will be out here in the timeline view. As usual, I'm just gonna change the color of this as well. And I am just gonna change the sample icon. There we go, there we have it. We have all the tracks that are here within their own groups, and it's gonna be a lot easier later if you want to manage them as an individual summing track or individual track itself, sending to auxiliary and stuff like that. I'm gonna right click and I'm just gonna see to track header components. The other important thing I would say is also freeze. Now why do I say this is because when you click on this, you will see this freeze icon. Sometimes you want to freeze your track, especially if you have a lot of software instruments running, like especially like Massive or Serum. It's gonna be taking a lot of your computer load. So this icon here comes in very useful. There's also one more setting that you need to set up. If you right click, you can go to the toggle hide view. What does this mean? Is basically you can hide tracks that you don't want to see. So this will be very useful later on when I show you about tracks that are, I would say, hidden, because those are auxiliary tracks, which I'm going to go through next. Basically what does this do is the H stands for hidden. So when you click on it, it's not going to show when you turn this off. If I click on it and it's not highlighted in green, that means all your tracks are showing. Okay, so the next thing basically is to understand your mixing process. Now typically for me, I would like to have the drums sent to a parallel compressed track. Now what I mean by that is basically to double up my drum. I'm just gonna heat up my mixer right now. I'm gonna select all of them and I am going to create a send. Let's create a send maybe up to bus 20, and this will be under pre-fader. So there's post fader and pre-fader. So post fader is basically when your drums are sending out the signals with the effects. Now what I want to do is to send out the drums without the effects. So I'm going to head it over here at pre-fader, and I'm just going to make all of them at 0 decibels. So over here you can see there is this thing called auxiliary 4. It's your drum parallel compression track. I'm going to rename this as drum parallel comp. I'm just going to change the color of this to something more of a darker tone, so you know it's always tied to your drums. You also want the drums to have sound effects. When you do sound effects, especially on your snares, you can have more control over it. You can sidechain your reverb on a sound effect. So I would recommend always set up with a sound effect for all of your effects in your production template. Now I am just going to send this over to drum bus 21. Let's put it this drum maybe effects 1. I am going to send that as a post send. So after all the effects, which is a post fader, I'm just going to select as post fader or post pan, and then I'm just going to make sure everything is at 0. So these effects you can always turn off and on, and you can also duplicate these effects and then send it again if you want a different effect. So I'm just going to name it as drum effects 1, and I'm going to change this channel strip color. Let's just put it under one color over here so that we know it's all under the drum effects. Now the synths, what I like to do is to group them together as one instrument, because sometimes you want to add filters, you want to sidechain them. Same thing for the bass and same thing for the samples. Now I want them separately, but ultimately all these 3 auxiliary tracks will go out to the master. So there's more control and there's more flexibility when it comes to the production here. For individual synths, you can send it to separate effects. Now I'm just gonna put it to another send under here, synths, effects, and I'm just gonna change this color to this. Actually, for your synth output, you can always send this out to your synth sidechain. Now it's important to note, because everything that is processed within your synth, you can send it to the sidechain. That will be your final synth level, which is this track over here. Then again, this is always expandable. You can expand these effects and then add it over here to have more effects on each individual synth. So the same thing for the bass. I'm just going to select these 2 bass. Sometimes the bass you will want to control your sidechain compression as well. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to send the bass out to bus 24. I'm just going to recolor this. Of course, I'm going to create another set of effects. And there we go, we have all of our mixing chain in any case that you want to send all your samples to certain effects, you can always send it to the individual effects over here. Yes, drum, synth and bass, you can always create one for your samples as well. So that is literally up to you, but the major components are all set up. Now, the next thing I want to do is to create these auxiliary tracks to be visible on the timeline itself. Now, why this is important is because whenever I automate effects on these auxiliary tracks, you can actually see them on your timeline. And I'm just going to select all this, and I am just going to create track. All of the auxiliary tracks here are already created. I'm just going to drag it down so it's not in the group. And this is the best part, because I am going to group them all in one group. I can always make them as a track stack, put it as a folder stack, and I'm just going to name this as effects. Lastly, I'm going to change the icon of each track. So if you look at it, your timeline right now is very organized. The very last thing that you should have over here is your master folder. Now what I mean by this is you want to see the whole level of your masters or your mix, and then you can apply your multi-band compression or your limiter to prepare for yourself for mastering and stuff like that. I'm going to go to my stereo out and my master. Now I'm going to change this channel strip color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create these 2 tracks, and these 2 I am just going to rename it in caps master and stereo out. I want to bring the master out of this. Okay, so the master and the stereo out, I'm just gonna make sure that they are separately out like that, so it's easier for you to see. So these 2, I'm just gonna change this as the final icon. So I'm just gonna save it as electronic music template, and boom. So if you open up the mixer one more time, I'm just gonna drag the mixer down. You can actually see everything is very organized. And this is very important, guys, if you guys want to have a very optimized and quick workflow in your music production, especially this is tailored for electronic music producers. So for those of you who are interested in this production template, I do have the download link. Just for $1, you guys can download it on my Ko-fi page in the description box below. I know for those who are not using Logic Pro, you guys may be using Ableton or FL Studio. If you guys have your own template as well in your respective DAWs, remember to share it in the comment down below so other producers using the same DAW as you guys other than Logic Pro can have the sense and download them from you guys as well. Let me know in the comments if you need further clarifications on this production template or where I can improve on, especially tailored to your workflow. Now, if you guys are interested to know more about Logic Pro as well, I do have a very old video that I'm going to share it up here. Now, that video is going to talk about all the basics of Logic Pro, and also there's a download of a very beginner production template for Logic Pro X as well. Now, if you guys really like this video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. Turn on post notification bell icon so that whenever I release important tutorial videos that affects your workflow or in Logic Pro, you guys will get notified. Once again, it's so nice to see you guys over here. I'll catch you guys on the next video. It's been a pleasure. Peace.